Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to turn this very plain and boring wall behind me into this chic Parisian style statement wall. This is going to be the first episode of me making over this office. Obviously it desperately needs it. It's very plain and boring in here, but we're going to transform it. I'm going for a contemporary feel as well as some Parisian touches, which we're going to start today with this accent wall. Number one is deciding what pattern or configuration you want for your wall molding. I knew right away that I wanted something pretty minimal. I know wall moldings can get pretty fancy and intricate sometimes, but I wanted something just like streamlined, minimal. Just started searching wall molding, Parisian wall molding, and looked at all the inspo that came up and decided which configuration that I wanted. I decided to go with a 3-panel so that it was symmetrical, and I thought it was the best amount of panelings that would fit my wall really nicely. And I like the configuration of the taller, longer one on the bottom with the shorter, more rectangular one, I guess, at the bottom. And I also liked some of them I saw had a line, like just a straight panel dividing those two sections. So I decided that's the one I wanted to do. Step number 2 is going to be measurements, figuring out the exact measurements of the wood panels and just like how everything is gonna lay on the wall. This is where your measuring skills and your math skills a little bit will come in handy. This part was particularly frustrating for me because I am super visual and I found it hard to visualize what it was gonna look like. So what we did is use a visual aid at first, really just like for me to put my head around it. So what I did was use painter's tape, just stick it on the wall in the pattern that we wanted. So I don't have B-roll for this. I somehow lost a bunch of the footage, so some of this also is just me and Dustin reenacting it for you, but I didn't want to redo the tape. But with painter's tape, we just taped out the pattern super roughly. There was no measurements involved. I was just kind of guessing like based on the room that we had. And then we also did some Googling, and I ended up finding a video where the girl was showing her measurements, and her wall happened to be like pretty similar in size to mine, so we worked off of that and the visual aid and used those two to come up with the measurements that we needed. I'm gonna save you all that measuring and confusion in that time to figure out all the measurements and show you guys what we came up with. Here's the plan that we decided on. These outside lines are the edges of the wall. We decided on a 5-inch gap between the edge of the wall and the panels all around. So all this space, and this space, this as well. And then we decided on this middle panel that goes straight across. For this, we went with 32 centimeters from the bottom of the wall. For symmetry, we thought that it would be best to leave a 10-inch gap in between all of the panels. So in between here, and then in between the top and bottom panels. For the top panels, we went with a length of 53.5 inches. For the widths, we went with 30.5 inches. For the bottoms, we went with a height of 22 inches and with a width again of 30.5 inches. Once you have your plans all laid out, ready to go, so we ended up going to our local Home Depot right before lockdown. It was a stressful time. This is what you'll need at the hardware store. The wood paneling. So I went with this one. I thought it was the nicest from the ones that we needed to pick, and it's minimal. Like it has some detail to it, but it's not like crazy busy. And then you'll need a saw. Dustin actually happened to have a circular saw, but you can easily use a hand saw, but you'll also need a miter to help you cut the wood on an angle. And then we picked up some sandpaper, some caulking, some sort of adhesive as well. So we used No More Nails, which ended up being kind of a fail. More on that later. You'll need a laser level, your paint color, which was a struggle for me. More on that later as well. We'll need a few more things, but we'll get to that as I explain how to do things. Once we had all the tools that we picked up, we used the laser level to just transfer what we had on paper, our plans on paper, onto the wall so that we would be able to then follow that pattern exactly and have everything be leveled, like nice and straight, so it didn't look crooked and like super DIY. Now that you have your plan laid out on the actual wall, you can now cut your panels to size. Just measuring the lengths that we need on the board. We figured out that we can get a long piece going this way and then a horizontal piece out of the one panel. So we measured that out and marked it here. And then we're gonna use a saw to cut it. We did it in sections, so we did all the tall, long upper panels at once. We would do like the one, make sure it was exactly the size that we wanted, and then use that one as a guide for the rest of them so that they would be all the same size. There's gonna be like obviously a slight margin of error, so we tried to like minimize that by using the first cut as a guide. It's gonna happen, but it should be okay anyway. So you wanna cut on an angle. Make sure that when you're cutting in the same direction for all of them. We cut from out to in every time.
Yes, from big side to little side.
Yeah. So that the corners meet in a perfect frame and fit together perfectly. You'll basically cut and cut and cut and get all the pieces that you need in the right size. And then you want to use your sandpaper, and I just sanded down all the edges of the panels that we had, just because when you cut them, the wood gets like a little cringy. I don't know. Just the wood is not the nicest, cleanest cut, so I just use the sandpaper to sand away the excess wood like frills. I'm definitely a contractor. I totally know what I'm doing. Step number 6 is the most fun one, or at least I thought it was gonna be, is to put the panels on the wall. Started off first with the adhesive. Like I said, we were using No More Nails, so we were putting the glue on the back of the panel and then going ahead and sticking that on the wall, which is what I saw in most of the videos I watched. So I figured it would work. That's why we purchased it. It really turned out not to be a great option. It was leaving too much of a gap between the wood panel and the wall, so the panel wasn't sitting nice and flush to the wall. There was like a really big gap. Wait, what? It's so thick.
I know. That's why I say you gotta push really hard.
I'm not that strong. Like,
You should put a thinner. But yeah, there's gonna be a gap like that on all of them.
that's way too big. Should we smooth it out first, babe?
Good.
I expected a gap, which is why we got the caulking, just to finish everything nicely and have it look seamless. But this gap was not going to be filled by caulking. Like, it was quite big and it just like wasn't looking nice. We then ended up taking it off and using something to smooth the glue down so it wasn't adding to the gap, but it was still leaving such a big gap that I was just not happy with it. Figured out that getting a nail gun would be a better option. Headed back to Home Depot and we were able to rent a nail gun. We asked for these tiny, I think I have one. Yeah, I have one right here. It's these tiny little finishing nails. Okay, that's never gonna focus, but it's just these super small finishing nails that you can use for wall molding. So that's what we got. When we came back, we used the nail gun and it was just like such a smoother process. It just went so much quicker, so much better with the nail gun. I would definitely advise to go with the nail gun if you can. From then on, using the nail gun, we just placed the bigger side, the outer edge of the panel on the line that we had drawn, and then just use the nail gun to nail it in. But then that's when we ran into our second issue, which is that some of the panels are warped and the finishing nails aren't super strong. Like I showed you, it's just like a tiny skinny little piece of metal. It will hold it there, but it's not super strong. It doesn't have grip into the wall, so that even when we nailed it to the wall, it wasn't sitting. So if one side is sitting, the other one's not. This panel, for example, which is leaving quite the big gap, this one's really warped. This side is nice and flush, but then this side just sticks out, and if I push it back in, then this side just goes ahead and pops out slightly. Definitely make sure when you're shopping for your wood panels, you are really analyzing them and checking them to make sure that they're as straight as possible so that they're able to sit flat on the wall just using those finishing nails. Otherwise, you'll run into the same issue. Even though we had this issue, we just kept going, adding the panels to the wall while trying to think of a solution. If you're unlucky like we were with the wood panels warping and everything, we ended up finding a solution with these paneling screws. So they're these tiny little screws with a really small head that will prevent the wood from splitting, but they are strong enough to be able to anchor the panels really nice and tightly to the wall. The screws actually fixed the problem really well, so we ended up just taking some time to pick out the boards that were sticking out a little bit more and then adjusting them with the screws. We even went as far as screwing some of the boards together at the point so that they met nicely and just looked more seamless. Once we were done with all the screws, we moved on to caulking. So we did our best to fill in the gaps between the wood panels and the wall. It was a very time-consuming process and a very messy one, but I feel like it was worth it because it made everything look just so much more seamless and polished and just a lot more professional. Then it was time for our last step. It was time to paint, and I'm really happy with the color that I ended up picking, especially that it took me so long to pick. I had picked up a bunch of paint swatches and I just couldn't for the life of me decide. I had them on the wall, was looking at them in different lights, and I couldn't decide. I asked everyone at home and even went as far as to asking you guys your opinion on Instagram and get you to vote. So we finally settled together on the color Canvas Luggage from Bear, and we went in a satin finish. We did 2 coats of it and it applied really beautifully, and I just absolutely love it. So without further ado, here is the final wall. obsessed. I love it so much. I love the way it turned out. I feel like it looks very much like the inspo pictures I was looking at. Let me know what you guys think and if you'd ever tried this DIY yourself. Here are 2 more videos to watch and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!